Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. Welcome to a reunion episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm GiGi Fruit Loop. What you know?
Did you know that Fruit Loops are all the same flavor?
Are they really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
That's a mind game.
I know, right? It is.
Oh,
That'd be a good taste test to do, to give people a bunch of different Fruit Loops and get them to say, what flavors is.
Oh man, I did not. That's crazy. All right. So, music fact of the day: the biggest selling single of the 60s was She Loves You by the Beatles. It sold 1.89 million copies. That's crazy. People download that in 5 minutes now of a artist like release an album. Gets 1 million downloads in like 5 seconds. Crazy.
Yeah.
Things have changed. Speaking of change, so we have not been together here since July of last year.
Mm-hmm.
It has been a hot minute, almost a year. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell everybody what you've been doing for the last 10 and a half months?
No, I'm just kidding. I was going to say sitting doing nothing. No. Some of you guys follow me on my, I don't even know what it is, Facebook, whatever it is, on my Fruit Loop page on Facebook. But so we are running a secular nonprofit that is for victims of domestic violence. It's called The Hiding Place. So it's under Channel Missions, but it's called The Hiding Place. So you can find us at Channel Missions on Facebook. We offer a 24/7 hotline, counseling, resourcing, and advocacy. We are on a beautiful, which you got to come up to.
Oh, it's great. Your property is amazing.
40-acre property for survivors and their children to come and seek healing and restoration.
And refuge.
Yes. So it's very peaceful on site. It's a beautiful property. We offer support groups starting in June. This is going to be a big deal for our hotline because some people we help, they don't come on site. So we just help them with resourcing and different things. They may already have housing but need help with other things. So we're starting a support group to connect our offsite clients with some more resourcing and counseling. So you guys know my heart that I love Jesus and that's what I do. And that's why I do this work. But we don't ever want to have somebody feel like they can't come to us because they could be a different religion, race, anything. So we are secular nonprofit and we open the doors because, as you know, domestic violence knows no race, male, female. We do help males. They're just offsite. We don't house them. So we would put them up in a hotel. So
it's crazy how much has happened in almost a year with you. We don't see each other hardly ever anymore because you live almost an hour away now.
Yep.
For a good reason. We're just so physically far apart. And I finally got to come up right before trial. And I was blown away, not only at what you and Brianne have done in 10 months, but what is to come with such a big property. I mean, it's endless. So what I'm going to do is put a link in the description for Channel Missions, which is her ministry, her and Brianne's ministry, and your cousin. And if you guys feel led and you're able, please donate because this money goes to keep us from hearing about the many, many times we've covered domestic violence ending in murder.
Yeah.
And that's and this case that we're about to talk about, Charles Vallow was a victim of domestic violence. It ended in murder. And so it really drives home. Men, women, children, it's a cycle.
Yeah.
And you're offering people a place to break that cycle.
Yeah.
So I want you guys, if you're able and inclined, please donate to this cause. It is just the beginning. And I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah. We had awesome response. A lot of you guys sent us things like beading, like we do beading for part of our therapy and beads and all kind of stuff like that, paint. And we're still using it. So you guys are awesome in doing that.
Alibis are just unique. And I am so happy that the people that have been with us from that first day back in that closet, the day they found the kids' bodies was the day we launched this podcast. When I saw Nate eating in the chopper, I called Fruit Loop. I said, get over here. So it's a safe place and it's just getting off the ground. Mm-hmm. And what you guys have already housed victims. You've already helped people. You have people on property now. I just can't wait to see in 5 years where you're at because what you've done in 10 months is mind blowing. And it was hard for the listeners to get used to us not back and forth, but at the same time, like I think 10 months later, we feel like you're doing what you need to be doing. I'm doing what I need to be doing. We talked about doing this before the trial even started.
Yeah.
Which is kind of just going through some new things that we've learned. We did the Connecting the Dots series. For those of you who are new to the podcast, Fruit Loop and I started this, like I said, the day they found the kids' bodies. But back in December of 2019, I sent Fruit Loop an article. And I was like, this case is crazy. You got to read this. This is going to be really a big deal. And do you remember those early days of like sleuthing Alex Cox online?
Yeah. Yeah, we did a bunch of that stuff.
Like the day that we read that first article, we were looking at social media pages and things like that. And you know, what's crazy is like we found some really disturbing stuff Alex was a member of, like on these really weird websites. So we found some websites that Alex was a member of that was later kind of confirmed in court. And the only thing that wasn't mentioned in court, whether or not they didn't see him or the profile was pulled, was some barely legal stuff with Alex. And it was kind of fetish sites, just very odd. And anything barely legal when you've got somebody who's overage but looks underage is just creepy to me. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But anyway, so we learned a lot in the months before the kids' bodies were found. And you remember we went back and forth about whether they were alive.
Yep.
And I remember specifically one time that you really thought they were alive was when you saw the police footage of Tylee and Lori and Melanie Gibb in the police station. And you said after you saw that, you thought the kids were still alive.
Yeah, there just seemed to be that connection between Lori and Tylee. And yeah, I really thought, I was like, there's no way.
Yeah. It's crazy to think back because we were like, well, maybe they're in a compound because we didn't know at that point how big the cult was.
Yeah.
How many people there were there different, camps or bunkers and that kind of thing. But, the day they found the kids' bodies, we had talked about a podcast. It was COVID. At that point, you lived 5 minutes away. So you were here all the time during like lockdown and all that. And so we were just sitting here. We had a tiny little table with 2 computers on it. And we were just researching these people.
Yep.
And there wasn't a whole lot there. I mean, we found more since, but we did find some things very early on that was interesting. I should boot up that old computer and look because I have all that saved. That might be fun to put out there one day. But here we are, 3.5, almost 4 years since these murders happened back in 2019. And we've had a trial, which were you surprised the trial went off really without a hitch?
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. And where we are is very remote. So I don't get a lot of internet. We have very slow internet. I would catch it, several days later. Just updates maybe on your page or whatever of what's going on. So
following this really from the first time it hit the news, it's been surreal to go from there to having this trial finished. And we had that little scare towards the end of last year where her competency came in question again.
Dude.
I was like, here we go.
Yep.
Ding, ding, round 2. But it came back really quickly that she was competent to stand trial. I don't know, though. I kind of feel like now that there's been this guilty verdict and really with Tammy Daybell's murder, with the conspiracy to commit murder charges, I was not sure if the jury would get that charge. Yeah. There was very little offered as far as like conspiracy wise, but then you got the totality of it. And then, it's one of those things where that was something that the one juror that has spoken out that was a deliberating juror said he could have got hung up on that. But you look back and then you see that she's Googling malachite rings and wedding stuff before Charles is even murdered. And so it doesn't take a rocket scientist with the text messages of, hey, go be with your family. It's like that was one thing I think was a good strategy by the prosecution was to show she was manipulative just as much.
Oh, for sure. The one thing, and we talked about this, the one thing that stood out to me was when they talked about Chad with JJ.
Oh,
because we had heard nothing like that.
Yeah. So that was a few things about the scratches on Chad's neck. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's chilling because you think, number one, she's just letting Chad take JJ, who has very specific needs and likes routine and
and people.
Right. And the same people in his life. And then he's got all these wackadoodles coming around. And you think, Chad, I did not know this. I don't know how I didn't know this. Chad's like 6'3". He is a tall guy. So you think it had to have been a situation where if JJ is scratching his neck, then JJ is being pinned down.
Oh, for sure.
Because even if like Chad's standing there and JJ's on the bed, he's still not going to be able to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That chilled me to the bone.
Yeah.
And it surprised me too that Chad even had anything to do with JJ. And it wasn't for long. Unfortunately, it was 2-3 weeks before. Tylee wasn't there a week, maybe before 8 days, a week. Then she was murdered, and then JJ just a few weeks. But you could see why JJ would be combative to some guy that you don't even know.
Yeah.
Who's doing things like taking you upstairs.
Yeah.
Which is something your mommy does or your daddy does, except your daddy's been murdered by murderous crew. So before we jump into the trial, what do you think about these new charges in Arizona for Brandon?
I was like, what? I mean, we've all thought it.
Yeah.
And we just didn't know if we'd ever get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was thinking about that before trial, just how it seemed like that kind of fell in the cracks. But then we find out that was actually filed in February of last year. They just let Idaho do their thing.
Yeah. It wasn't it sealed or something?
Yeah.
Didn't they seal it?
They sealed the indictment. Then it was released, and it really didn't have any, there was no like probable cause affidavit or anything like that. It just told the charges. What did you think when you heard guilty on everything?
I honestly, I was first of all praying we had Wi-Fi. And we did. And actually, we're sitting in the office and we're not moving, playing it on a phone. And you get to that point where they're reading it. And it's like, okay, the guilty, not guilty. And they say it. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And then it's just like dominoes after that.
Mm-hmm.
But I was happy and ecstatic for everyone.
I heard you shed some tears.
I did. I got a little emotional. I was like, dang.
Mm-hmm.
Because what Kay and Larry's been through and Annie and everybody.
Yeah.
It comes down to that moment where you don't know what the jurors are going to do.
Yeah.
Like,
and being in there with the court, with the clerk of court, she has to read like that whole paragraph before she gets to the verdict. And we're all just sitting there like, poor lady. It's like she's doing her job, and inside we're all like, just get to it.
Skip
guilty
it.
Or not.
Yeah.
But like you say, you get that first guilty, what's coming. It was just getting that first guilty out. And then you felt the air in the room get a lot lighter. Kay and Larry and the family that was there, they were very composed. They didn't know sudden outburst. Crusher was in the courtroom.
Yeah. You didn't even hear a gasp.
You could hear a pin drop in there.
Yeah.
And I rode up with some of the investigators and Lindsay Blake in the elevator. And we asked how she was feeling, or somebody asked how she was feeling. There were a couple of other people besides me that weren't affiliated with the case directly. How are you feeling? And she said, well, you do the best you can do, and then you give it to the jury. And she seemed pretty calm and cool. And, she lost her dad I believe the day before, like a couple of days before Melanie Gibb testified. We were off on like a Monday for the funeral, but we had a shorter day, I believe, when he died, or the day after I can't remember. Like, it's a blur, but like, she was a boss. She got up there and questioned Melanie Gibb, and you would have never known her dad had just passed away. And from what everybody I've talked to, it seemed sudden. And it was just a testament to justice in this case for these kids and Tammy, and in a way, Charles too, because they were sort of limited in what they could bring in, but a lot came in about Charles.
Yeah.
Money, sex, and power was kind of the theme of the openings and the closings. And do you think that's accurate?
Yes. After hearing everything, yes.
Yeah, it really is. I never really bought it until this trial, to be honest with you. I knew it was like money had a big driving force. I really thought the money was going to be their way to fund these white camps they wanted, or just Lori was a hairdresser. And then, she didn't want to work. She lied to everybody, said she's going to find work and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But as the trial went on, it did become clear it was about money, power, and sex. But also there was religious stuff there.
Well, didn't Chad text Lori something about Kay not coming up, not giving up any of the money or something?
There was something to that effect. Yeah.
There was something that he texted Lori about that. Well, she's not giving up any of the money or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, so, yeah.
I mean, the things that like, because if you've been through these documents like we have, like the Gilbert and the Chandler documents, there was a lot revealed, but it just really added to kind of what we already knew, and it made it even worse than we ever could have imagined. That's how I felt sitting in that trial.
Yeah, and I think too, you see her reactions in court. Even when the verdict was read, there was nothing.
Americans spend an average of 90% of their time indoors. According to the EPA, indoor air could be 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air, and in some cases, it could be 100 times more polluted. We take about 20,000 breaths per day. That's almost 3 gallons of possibly polluted air. Airborne allergens are the most common allergy triggers, such as pollen, pet dander, dust mites, and mold. Look, I love my animals, but they make me sneeze. But since I've been using Air Doctor, I don't have to take my allergy medicines, and I see a huge decrease in the amount of dust in my house. That's a win-win. What's the solution? Air Doctor filters out dangerous contaminants and allergens so your lungs don't have to. Air Doctor uses an ultra HEPA filter that's been independently tested to remove 99.99% of tested bacteria and viruses. The classic Air Doctor 3000 purifier is powerful enough to circulate the air in a 630 plus square foot room 4 times per hour. And the Whisper Jet fans are 30% quieter than the fans in ordinary air purifiers. So, Air Doctor comes with a no questions asked 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you don't love it, just send it back for a refund minus shipping. So head to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code WhatTheWorld. And depending on the model, you'll receive up to 39% off.
Nothing. She didn't, take a deep breath. Anything, because I done went back and watched it like 20 million times.
I know.
And I'm like, did she flinch? No.
Very satisfying to watch.
Yeah.
As that, because she was convinced she would be found not guilty.
Yeah. She's not human, right?
Yeah, right. She don't have to pee.
She ain't got to go to the pot. I just still don't understand that.
I don't understand either. She ain't had a big gulp from 7-Eleven.
Every day she goes.
I know. Yep.
But how do you convince yourself you didn't go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, she convinced herself of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Some of the things that, because with you having limited internet, you haven't been able to listen to all the testimony. So there were just some things that I picked out, and this may end up and be something we randomly do because, you think about 10 more good points after we finish this that we didn't even touch. It's a 6-week trial. It was long. It was a little bit harder than Murdoch to me because Murdoch, I could come home every weekend. And with this, there were times where I had 2-week stretches being away from home. And so by the end, we were all like, let's do this. But the fact that Chad called JJ, Tylee, Tammy, and Charles obstacles, just those 4.
Yeah.
I mean, that was gross. It's not shocking to think that he would do that. I mean, we heard again in court the call of him calling the mortuary, and that blew the jurors away, by the way.
Here's my question. I mean, we obviously know they're not obstacles, but just leave.
Yeah.
If that's what you choose to do with your life, just leave. They're not obstacles. Just leave.
Right.
You don't have to harm them.
Mm-hmm. And I think the big thing too is that was what Summer said in the call, which, by the way, in my opinion, was probably one of the most emotional days in court that didn't involve seeing crime scene photos.
I'm gonna tell you I listened to a little bit of that. That was brutal. Man,
her tone was a mixture of being terrorized and furious and devastated and bewildered. It was just such a mixed bag of emotions that all were so identifiable as this call played. It was like 9 minutes. So it bounced off these walls.
And I think too, and we remember the interview where they didn't think she had harmed the kids. So it's that letdown of, I spoke up for you. I went to bat for you, and here I find out this is everything that happened.
Right. If you watch Sins of Our Mother, Janice says, I was wrong.
I think back, there's 2 things I think about Kay saying, and I think we're going to hit on in a minute, that she was a doting mom.
Mm-hmm.
She was engaged with her kids, like all these things. Colby is still living, right?
Right. Yeah.
So she didn't harm him. Like those things like that happen until I was going to say Cletus, Chad.
Peter Griffin is Colby called him in the phone call.
Oh, that was great. It didn't happen until that mixture got together, and yeah.
It's like a tornado. It's like 2 forces that commingle, and then there's a whole path of destruction.
Yeah. When you have somebody in the case as much as Kay and Larry, have been and affected, and I don't think Lori's side is any different. They didn't know.
No, and people have wanted to argue with me about that and say, "Well, she was never a good mom." Well, yeah, in hindsight, we know that. We got the custody documents after all this happened. People show you what they want you to see.
Yep.
And that's what Lori did, and that's what Lori's done her whole life, is she has become kind of whatever spouse or mother or what that benefited her at the time.
Yep.
And so with Charles, he was financially secure. Colby kind of talked about how that wasn't the case, and it seemed like every other month he said that his mom would say they were broke. I don't know how much of that is true, but not on Colby's part, but like Lori will say things that aren't true.
Yep.
And I remember one time too, Kay told an investigator going through the documents that there were lean years, and that's any married couple unless you're just multimillionaires. There are years where you're good, you're doing good, you got a little extra, and then he was in business for himself. So of course you're going to have years where it's my dad owns his own business. And so I've seen those years where it's been a little more lean than others, but she had a very comfortable life. And then you look, and that was one thing Archibald said in his closings is put a picture of Chad and Charles next to each other, put their bank accounts essentially next to each other. Explain this to me. Kay was the first witness, and we know a lot of that came from the drama of whether or not Kay and Larry were going to get to attend.
That was so stupid.
And that came from Lori, I'm convinced, 100%.
That's what I think too.
I think that, all these little hearings have been easy to sit there at a bond hearing or whatever. But when you got to sit there and they're going to see pictures of their grandson on the screen and know that you allowed this to happen, like that's a different ball game. And I think it was her. Are you surprised Lori didn't allow mental illness to come in?
Yeah, but then it shows a weakness on her part. And I don't think she would, you know what I mean? I don't think she would admit anything was wrong. I mean, if you listen to Colby's phone call that he had with her, nobody knows the truth. That's what you think. That's what everybody's saying. And I know the truth and da 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 da. So I don't think she ever thought she was wrong.
It really is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was almost like I know more than you do on a spiritual level. So you can't understand this, but I do. And it was hard. When Colby came in, she said, "Oh, my baby," when he came through the door. And he looks different. He's kind of got like a little sort of a ponytail in the back. It's like, shaved and longer on the top or whatever. But man, she stared at him. But, Kay, like you say, she said, well, she was a good mom until she wasn't. And then they had no clue. It's the same as Janice and Summer. You have to be gracious to everybody who knew and loved Lori, because nobody would have ever thought. Maybe her views are getting a little crazy or whatever. But even with Charles, with the pleading to the police and the things that he must have told Kay and Larry, they never could have imagined that she would do this.
Yeah.
And if they had, JJ would have been like swooped out of there. Tyler would have been swooped out of there. And so she talked about the 35-second FaceTime call, which was their last contact with JJ. It was quick, not like what they were used to.
Yeah. It reminds me of those videos you see where somebody's held captive and they tell them what to say, and then they're like, they cut it off. So, I mean, from what I've read and heard, it was very scripted, and he was gone.
It really didn't get real for these jurors until Melanie Gibb got on the stand. Then we start talking about religious, I don't even want to call it religious stuff. It's not. It's just wackadoodle. It's a combination of like Harry Potter and Twilight and everything else.
Yeah, and Chad's books.
Which
I still read one, and I don't think you've read any.
So. Oh, I had to read one. I had to read One Foot in the Grave or Even Stevens. So
okay.
Next one's on you. They're still on Amazon, by the way. The reason being is until he's convicted, they won't take them off. The casting sessions blew the jury's minds when they first heard about that. It was interesting to watch the progression of shock on that jury's face.
I was going to say, I would like to see the faces.
Yeah. I have to say, I don't think these jurors really knew much at all about this case. Judging by their body language and their facial expressions as they were acclimated into the world of Lori Vallow.
When you think about it, before I started following this case, I really didn't I wouldn't know details of anything. I may hear somebody was arrested or whatever, but I wouldn't know details. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And you weren't even really from a true crime background at all, except we used to binge the heck out of Forensic Files in the first 48. And that was kind of the extent of legal stuff. So they talked within weeks of first talking about the possessions, then zombie came a few weeks later. And the zombie word was cheesy to some of the jurors, I think, because they were kind of like, zombie? I mean, really? That's what we're saying humans are? It's a very Hollywood thing, it's Walking Dead. But when they said that when Melanie Gibbs said that JJ had become a zombie by Lori, when she was there visiting, that was a big moment for the jury. Then they talked about Lori felt her and Chad's affair was God's will because they had been together in other probations and had a mission together. Do you think she really believed all this stuff?
You would have to be able to sit through what she just sat through and had to look those people in the face, and she reacted and how the whole time. I think I think she has to believe everything she's saying. But I think now you're gonna be sitting in a cell, and we know she's gonna be tried in Arizona and all that. Will it ever a light bulb go off and say, "Dang, look what I did"?
Yeah, and that's kinda what I've heard too, is that at the moment, I don't know if she has any moments of clarity, but the comment was made to me, maybe one day, like, it'll hit her what's happened. We'll see. I think that she has to know on a level, but her behavior in the courtroom was so bizarre. But, the one thing too that I've always heard is being incarcerated can very much aggravate mental illness. It can make it worse.
Dude, I don't wanna be sitting in no cell like that.
Look, I tell you what, man, I tunnel you out, you tunnel me out. Let's
Oh,
make a deal.
man.
We know that Colby was told by Lori Charles had a heart attack, didn't happen. He testified to that. Going through the jury, because this was a lot more that I thought about Charles that would come in, but it's so necessary to the whole story.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they had a dance they had to do to kind of make this to keep this stuff in. But what always kind of cracks me up is when not cracks me up, but when the judge is like, "Okay, we're gonna strike that from the record, jury. You just didn't hear that."
Yeah.
They're
I'm
like, "Okay, let me
"Ain't
just
no way."
take it out my brain."
Yeah.
You have to wonder what that was like for Colby.
Mm.
To be I don't know if he's seen his mom. I know we know he moved to Rexburg when she was kind of in the earlier days. I think maybe before they had their second kid. He and Kelsey moved to Rexburg for a while. So I don't know if he saw her, but we know that they talked because they played that call.
Yeah. And I think he would have to be approved on her visitation list or whatever.
Mhm.
Who
Yeah, any of that
knows?
stuff. You have to
Yeah.
be approved. You have
Yeah.
to approve the person.
Yeah.
I think Justin Lum added her like a couple of years ago, and she added him back and scheduled a call, but like she just took credits or something, didn't show up.
Oh, wow.
Justin Lum and Nate Eaton, I'm gonna tell you, some good guys right there. Some good
Yeah,
guys.
that one morning Nate brought donuts. I saw that.
He's just a good guy. Colby talked about his mom's demeanor being calm after Charles's murder. And then she told him a few weeks later she wasn't getting the life insurance money. But you have to wonder what Colby's thinking about her being so calm about his stepdad of 13 years being murdered.
Look at the video that she's on there with the officer when Charles was shot. "Oh, hi, neighbor." Like that little, that little thing.
Do you remember the nosy neighbor that like was
Oh, yeah.
taking her trash
Yeah,
out?
yeah.
It's kind of like a vacuum in the lawn.
Yeah.
Being that neighbor.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that we've always heard, and I believe might have been confirmed before this, but for me, I don't think I'd heard it for sure, was that Joe Ryan had a life insurance policy that paid out to Tylee.
Mhm.
And Lori got it.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Well, didn't it come out in somebody's testimony or something that she switched where that went or something?
Yeah, and she did the Social Security payments towards the
Yeah.
end. It was August that she switched the banks, and then she learned her lesson with Charles. Make sure you got that money lined up before you kill somebody.
Yeah.
Because Tylee, even though Tylee was a minor, it would have had to have gone through probate, I'm sure. And Lori can't say her kids are dead. So she just had all that Social Security money coming from Tylee's into her own.
Yep.
So it's just so much premeditation. And I think that is what got her convicted. I said all along, like Lori will get herself convicted with her actions on body cam video, with these phone calls, that and these text messages. More than DNA was needed, because the jurors weren't super surprised that her hair was in the duct tape, to where when that was revealed, a lot of us were like, boom.
Yeah. Well, you think about it, you would think she would have some type of emotion when Charles was shot. and killed.
13 years with somebody. You've adopted a child together.
Mhm.
You've raised Tylee together. I mean, Charles came in Tylee's life when she was very little, really, really young.
Yeah.
And Colby too. I think that Charles was that stability Colby never had. And it's just so sad because really in the end, everybody sided with Lori. And when they realized what was up, it was too late. And on Sins of Our Mother, you've got Colby's wife, Kelsey, who's going through and talking about after Charles's murder, when things really start getting dicey, they go back because they chose not to read the emails Charles was sending the family because they felt like it was drama. And that's something they'll have to live with. And not that it's the wrong thing. In hindsight, it was to not hear him out after all that time of being like Colby's stepdad. But at the time, you know, if my one of my parents were to come to me and say, "Hey, look, your dad's got like another family somewhere he's taken care of," why would I doubt that? You see what I'm saying? Like you're going to be
Yeah.
loyal to, and you're going to trust your parent. But there's so much that so many people I think are going to have to resolve, or maybe never resolve, of what they did and didn't do in the lives of these 4.
Mhm.
Especially with
Yeah.
Charles, like,
Yeah.
because the kids, you just trust Lori's gonna take care of them.
Yep.
With Charles, it's like there were warning signs for months before he was murdered. Nobody took him serious.
Yep.
Does that make you mad as somebody who works with domestic violence victims that it seems like in this country we don't want to talk about men being victims as much as women?
Yeah. Yeah, and, the statistic, it's for women is 1 in 4 women experience domestic violence. For men, it's 1 in 9, I think, but it does happen, and obviously, we see everything that happened with Charles. That was dead on.
Yeah.
Narcissistic behavior by Lori. So it is sad that they didn't believe him.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Because in this case, it 4 lives were ended before anybody really caught on that she was just crazy.
Yep.
So we find out from Colby that he had contact. He had texted Tylee the day she was last seen alive in Yellowstone. They were in the Yellowstone National Park gift shop, and he heard Tylee on that call. So he had spoken to Lori, but I guess he heard Tylee in the background. And then you look at it. I always say Tylee is the hero in this story because I think she, if it weren't for JJ, she would have made her own way in Arizona. She was almost 17. And I think that she knew she had to go because she's seeing that JJ is not being taken care of, probably, and that you got these weird people. One thing that came out was really just, and we knew this, but also that she just hated Chad. Tylee was a spitfire.
Yeah.
And you wonder, do you wonder if maybe the murder, Tylee's murder happened partially because she knew too much about Charles?
I think so. I think that's part of it. And again, she was just an obstacle, is what Chad said.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it had something to do with it. But I tell you, Colby's call when he accuses Lori on that call, and he's like adamant. You text me, I'm trying to text my sister, and
Mhm.
and she's dead, and you're the one texting. Like,
Mhm.
that was tough.
And then on that call, Lori says, "I'm not hiding. Why would you think I'm hiding?" Lori says, "You're the one that doesn't want to talk." And Colby says, "Probably because you murdered my siblings. That's why I'm not talking to you." And
Yeah.
she says, "I didn't. I'm sorry you feel that way." So what did Colby say about what he was doing at that point that this phone call happened?
Oh, he was very emotional, and he said, "I've prayed for you in my worst moments. I've prayed for my siblings who you swore to me were okay." He says, "I thought I could trust you. I thought you were a completely different person." And then Lori says, "You've known me your whole life." And then he responds, "I don't know a murderous mother."
Yeah.
So he was, dude, I'm like,
Yeah.
sheesh.
I mean, it's heavy. He's lost everything as far as like his family that came before his children and things like that. I mean, he's lost. I know he met his biological dad at one point. I don't know if I don't think they have a relationship. I think maybe he even said that on the stand. I can't remember. But you think about it, he's lost his siblings. He and Tylee were close, it seems, and his mom's going to prison.
Yeah.
And so he's got, it looks like from the documentary that maybe he is in contact with his grandmother. By the way, Janice was in Boise. She was seen at a Trader Joe's. Never saw her in the courthouse. What did that say to you when you found out that nobody showed up for one day to support her? None of them.
Didn't an uncle or something come one day? Like,
Uncle
one that
Rex,
looked,
but he's not pro Lori.
yeah, no, he wasn't. I think it said a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't want to be there.
No.
They've been drugged through
Mhm.
this whole mess, not by choice. So, but I thought it did say a lot.
Yeah. Nobody. I mean, Summer did stay after her testimony until it started to get graphic, and then she left. But like, I saw her in the hallway. I saw her in the bathroom crying the whole time. Like, I felt so bad for her. I think she was one of the most powerful witnesses on that stand.
Yeah.
The whole trial, other than, just they all had their own weight, but that call was so raw. But Lori tells Colby at one point, one day you'll know what actually happened. We all will stand there with Jesus. But she said, Tylee and JJ love me. They're fine. They know the truth, and we are the only people that do. I mean,
it's out there.
It's so out there.
That one statement for me says, I believe in everything we've done.
Mm-hmm. Like, not a regret.
Yeah.
That's the thing that really, I think, hit everybody in the room, including the jurors, was not 1 ounce of sadness in any of these calls or text messages or anything. There was no emotion other than like really almost teenage emotions.
Yeah.
If she would have been as, I guess, expressive about her kids being dead as she was about the storm.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my Lord, Fruit Loop. I had to bite my tongue till I tasted blood that day. There were Snickers all in the courtroom. I snickered, but I had a graphic plan, but then I was like, we better keep it classy. Okay, Alibis, we talked a little long today. We went an hour and 20 minutes. So part 2 will be out tomorrow. Keep your eyes peeled for it. On Wednesday, we're going to start the Letitia Stout trial. We're going to go through and pick out all the facts of the case since we followed that one from the beginning, get caught up. Also going to do some extras this week, catching up on Kohberger and a few other things. So part 2 of this tomorrow, Wednesday, we're jumping into another case. All right, see you soon.